Solid 30 minutes of setup, Jason.
All right, man. I'm one guy.
Solid 30 fucking minutes. Boring 30 minutes where I can't speak freely because I'm being recorded. He's real pleasant to be around when he's being recorded. It's weird.
Yeah.
He hasn't given me shit once for Southern Bastards not coming out more frequently.
That's right. And as I was like driving or in the car up here, I was just like, I've been to LA a lot lately, and I still get culture shock. I just never know what the fuck I am.
Yeah. Well, I've lived here 10 years now, and I've just now gotten to the point where, like, I kind of know all the little regions and how they connect to each other, and I have, like, a picture of the city in my head, you know? Like, that's the thing I need, is I need to know, okay, the map in my head, I'm on this part. I know if I keep going this direction, I'm going to get to this part. But
Right.
before I constructed that, yeah, I'd step out of a place and be like, so north, south, east, west, no clue. Don't know where anything is. Just using GPS.
Do you think that worked in your favor? Like when you would be like meeting with Hollywood people, you'd be like, I just don't know where I am. It drives me crazy. I can't deal with it.
It's the best.
What do you do in the car though?
You listen to podcasts. You make phone calls. It's like like little breaks, little rest periods. You just you gotta be more zen about it.
Well, this explains the difference in our successes. Like yesterday, I had to go do that meeting, and a friend of mine I was staying with was like, "You're going to be late," and I was like, "Why would I start off as someone other than myself?"
Yeah.
I was like, if I'm 20 minutes late, they will always know that guy's going to be 20 minutes late. And
that tracks.
Yeah, exactly. When I get there, I'll give you my all, and then I'll see you when I get there. And I know that's not the best business strategy, but it's the only way that I can get it done.
Yeah. I turned 40 recently, and I'll be 41 soon, so it wasn't that recent. But I'm just gonna tell myself, I'm just gonna say I turned 40 recently until I'm 50.
I forget all the time. I forget how old I am.
I knew people that would do that when I was younger, and I'd be like, how is that possible? I also forget what year it is, because you work in this sense of like, okay, this is going to be out in 2020, and I'm working on this thing that'll be out in 2021, and hopefully if everything goes well, this will be out by 2022. And so I have this whole rolling system of all these numbers, and so I often don't know what year. I'm like, wait, what year is it right now? So like if a time traveler came to me and was like, quick, what year is it? It'd take me a minute. I'd be like, wait, hold on. I think it's 2018.
You're like one of those. I'm always afraid that I'm going to be one of those dudes that gets stopped by like Jay Leno when he used to be like, "Who's the president?"
Oh yeah. I watch those sometimes, and I'm like, I would have got that one. Okay. Oh, I would have done okay. Yeah, but I turned 40, and so I'm starting to get to that point where it's like up until this year, it was, I think I can do this, or I think I can work this way and I'll be more productive, and then I won't do this that I always do. Like, that's my mindset, oh, if I can only improve this aspect of how I work, or if I can not do this as much, then I'll be able to focus on this. And the last year I've been like, this is just my process. It's like I've hit the point where I'm like,
yeah,
that's the way it goes. No, I write 3 pages of a script, and then my brain makes me scroll the internet for 45 minutes trying to find, I don't know, like some video about Todd McFarlane doing something cool. Like
I've tricked myself into thinking like, oh, I wrote that one in a night because I had to.
Yeah.
No, I can do that now.
Oh yeah, no, I spent years going, okay, this script took me 2 days. If I can just write every script in 2 days, I can write 150 scripts in a year. This is going to be awesome. It'll be my most productive year ever. And then it doesn't happen.
Yeah, you got to fill the well back up, man.
Or you have to, plan your stories a little bit.
Right, yeah.
Bang them out on a keyboard.
Sure. I think there are people that do that, though, that like just, it's just a switch they can flip.
Sure.
You gave me like some of the best advice ever one time. It was when I...
Tell me, because I'm sure I forgot.
We were talking about something similar, and you said that sometimes you've written comics that you like bled for, and people were like, "This is the worst thing I've ever read," and then other times you've been like, "I just gotta get this done," And people are like, "You're a fucking genius."
Yeah.
And at the time, I had, when you're writing sort of like low level Marvel comics or mid tier Marvel comics,
Sure.
you want there to be a visceral reaction to what you're doing. And oftentimes that reaction is just sort of like, "Yeah, it's all right."
Yeah.
When you're doing an Image comic, if you put anything into it, people more times than not, if they like it, they fucking love it.
Yeah.
It feels like.
Yeah, if they are aware of it, they love it.
Right. When you do a Marvel comic that starts to get traction, or a DC comic that starts to have eyes on it, then the fucking reviews are all over the fucking place most of the time.
Yeah.
Like you can have 7 people that give you a 10 and 3 people that give you a 0 or whatever, or vice versa. And that is what I think trips people up the most. And hearing it come from you, knowing like Walking Dead has like, at the time, it still has. It's like transcends all those categories because it's like a pop culture phenomenon now, right? You got people reading that book that don't read any other comics, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that I always try to tell people is like we're not in control of whether it's good or not. Like we're not, like you have no sense of what people are going to think of your work because it's your work and you see it differently than everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, like issues that I'm like, oh, they're really going to love this one. I'm so proud of this one. People hate it. And then issues that I'm like, oh, if they found me out this month, they're going to be coming to take my my card away and never let me write again. People are like, oh, this one was really good. And so I try to remind myself of that every time I'm sitting at the keyboard and I'm just stressing out like, oh, this isn't good. What have I done? I need to fix everything. I need to scrap everything and start over. This is terrible. And then I'm like, people will feel differently. Let's just make a terrible one. I mean, I hate to admit it, but there are often times where I'm like, this is just going to be a bad issue. And when you've done 193 issues of Walking Dead, like it's okay if 172 ain't so great. Is what I keep telling myself. And so I'm like, all right, this is just going to be a bad one. Because otherwise I would never get anything done.
Right. And at that point, you've got so many people depending on you. And, it's not, like you said.
Oh, yeah. Like I can't, Charlie Adler, you don't get to work this month. It's like I can't make that decision,
I do think from a writing standpoint, like some of what allows you to let go is that you've built a whole world, right? Like if you're working on one character, you could it's like, well, if I fuck this up with this character in this issue, I can't fix it. But if you have a whole world, like you can sort of be like, well, I can deflect and actually tell this thing about this person I've been wanting to do.
Yeah, I mean, it helps because, Walking Dead especially was like this organic story that like just kind of built, as it went and it had like ups and downs, but the story was very, like free flowing and organic. It wasn't like a 3-act structure where every minute of every act had to like build to the ending.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little bit easier. I mean, that I think is the magic of monthly comic writing. I think that's why we're able to, write 12 issues a year of something and keep going because, like even your stumbles are going to have some kind of interesting tidbit that you can build upon later.
Right.
So when the story is constantly building upon a foundation and growing into something you're not really expecting, you can literally do anything. And somehow you'll go, oh, wait, that one issue that I thought was a real fuck up, like it had this one tidbit in it, and now that's the basis of this future story. And so that issue matters now in a way that it necessarily didn't when I was writing it.
Yeah. That happens, that happens a lot with Bastards. Like when Jason and I like talked through Southern Bastards, like at the beginning, very early on, I was always like, where the fuck are we going?
Yeah.
I have to know where we're fucking going because I have to draw it and I need to know, like, so I can, like, know what the goddamn restaurant looks like.
And Jason was like, I'll figure it out when we get there.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's like the king of brick by brick.
Yeah.
He's been doing Marvel stuff for so long and he's got sort of, like, been venerated because people like his stuff that's not mainstream. So he had found this perfect mix, especially when we started working together. He'd found this perfect mix of like, just consider the brick as I lay it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what if we go all the way to this, or we go all the way to that? And somehow, when we would talk stories out, would find myself in the role of being like, I felt like I feel like I co-write it with him, He might say differently. But I feel like our roles found themselves very quickly, you know.
You're like holding him to, like putting him to task, like how does this go and how does that go? And he's like, okay, I have to figure that out, so I'm doing a little bit of extra work that I wouldn't normally do because you asked that question.
Right.
I mean, I've had collaborators like that.
Or I'm going like, this character, let's do this with this guy.
Yeah.
Or let's do this with this person. And before you know it, like I've suddenly like written a whole plot line that we're using for the side character that folds back in the thing. And where I had the most trouble was the first time I sat down to write Coach Boss. And I was like, oh wait, this has always sort of been Jason's guy. Like I had to like write a speech for him. And it was weird because like, obviously this interview's not going to be just me talking about Southern Bastards.
Oh,
but that was very connected to Earl. Like Earl was like, we get like weirdly territorial about, or not territorial, but like weirdly like deferential about certain characters. But like building a world like that and having stuff you fill in, I guess, is.
Yeah.
Did you find it like easy to get lost?
Yeah, I mean, I think between Jason's approach and your approach, I kind of do a hybrid. Like my favorite thing is to make things up on the fly. That's the thing that makes me like excited. And it's the thing that like energizes me when I'm writing a story. So I like to leave openings for that. But what I'll do is I'll have like a story or a character or some kind of arc or something that's set up, and it'll hit a point where I have like 3 or 4 options for what's going to happen. So I have an end in mind, or I have something that I'm working toward, but I could be working toward option A, option B, or option C. And I'm not going to decide until I get there, and I'm open to coming up with option D when I get there as well. So sometimes if I'm talking to an artist, they'll be like, well, where does this story go? And I'll be like, well, I don't know, maybe the grandmother was a ninja, or, you know, maybe there was a dragon egg that hatched and they came out of it, and maybe this happened, or maybe this happened. And they're like, well, which one? And I'm like, you know, we'll figure it out. So that's fun. Like, I feel like I have the security of knowing that I know kind of where I'm going, but I have the freedom to go, I'm going to do something different. And when I'm writing and I go into I'm going to do something different, like, that's just when I'm having the greatest time. I mean, it happened a lot on Invincible, where I'd be like, nah, this guy does this, and this was actually his origin, and this happens. And
well, I've always, that's the thing I've always admired about you, is your willingness to just like, fuck it, we're flipping it on its head.
Yeah, it's supposed to be fun.
I agree. I mean, I agree with, well, I agree maybe for different reasons.
But I think it's the terror that comes from that I enjoy. That's what feeds me.
When I used to work at Marvel at the beginning, I was always like, God damn it, and when am I going to get more than 4 issues? Or 5 issues, or 6 issues? Like, I would like be like, I want to tell like a big story. And I always felt like I got to put every idea in the, you know, in this issue I'm writing, because I might not be able to do another one.
Sure.
And sometimes that happens, I mean, that very often happens with creator-owned stuff, too. Like, you get
the first 6 issues of Walking Dead were extremely truncated because I didn't know that there would be an issue 7. Like, that's why the whole story was set up around this love triangle between Rick, Shane, and Lori.
Right.
And that entire storyline was resolved by issue 6.
Right, because you didn't know if you were going to get another season, so to speak.
Yeah.
Writing with that, like, how do you deal with writing with the malaise that can come with knowing, like, oh, I got as long as I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because there's 2 things at work here. Like, one, you necessarily, you know, shouldn't put all that stuff into one arc because you think you're not going to get anything past that, because it makes the stories kind of, you know, cram-packed. At the same time, you don't want to get to a point where you're, you know, doing half a storyline per 6 issues because, you know, like, you're writing for the trade and you want to, you know, that also produces boring comics. Like, you want to try and find that middle ground where every issue exists on its own, every issue provides its own story, its own, like, you know, bit of excitement and stuff, but it all comes together in a larger story. So if I had to read a comic that had every idea jam-packed into every issue, I would prefer that to some of the comics that come out now, where it's like, all right, this is going to be a 6-issue story, and, you know, there's going to be a fight in issue 4.
Well, that's interesting, because when I think of, like, what comics you like, I probably have the wrong picture. but I always think of like early Image,
Oh, that's right.
which
Sure.
is like not exactly, God love them, but not exactly known for like.
I haven't gone back to read a lot of that stuff, but in my memory, they're fucking fantastic.
Right, exactly.
You know?
You're living with like
Sure.
the nostalgia. I'm not trying to talk shit.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like,
No, they
the
are
rep
traditionally
is-
known as
yes.
not being particularly well written
right.
comics.
That's the rep.
But at the same time, I think that story structure from those comics is what my entire career is based on. Like, I try to do as many 2-page spreads as possible. I try to do as many splash pages as possible. I try to have as much action and intrigue in my books as possible, and I try to end every issue on a cliffhanger. And that was something that those guys were doing nonstop back then.
Right.
And you can find that in all of my books, even a book like Outcast, where it's people in plain clothes talking about like demonic possession, and it's a somewhat quiet, thoughtful, dramatic book. There's 2-page spreads all the time, and splash pages, and like big cliffhangers, and
Right.
and it's structured like a '90s comic, even though it's this quiet, dramatic story.
Well, I've been listening to Rugg and Pisker's thing while I
Mhm.
draw, and I don't necessarily agree with everything they have to say about Image.
Yeah, fuck those guys.
I'm gonna send that to them. They can use it for the kayfabe thing. I've been listening to them, and they make a lot of good cases for like how, whether or not you like those comics, they were kind of distillations of a lot of stuff that came before them. Like there's a lot of like Kirby and
Oh, for sure.
like Liefeld or Lee or whatever.
Yeah.
The bombast, but just like channeled through a different, I don't know,
It's like
youthful.
it's a more intense version. You go back and you look at a Jack Kirby comic from the '60s, and it's a bunch of 6-panel grids, and every now and then there'd be like a really cool splash page, but it's not quite as hyped up as some of the '90s comics. But the elements are there, so you can kind of see how they were like, "This is cool, more of this,
Right.
this on every page," and their concept of anchor panels. Have you heard any of them talk about this? Where they're like, I draw one awesome figure per page, and then that's the anchor image on that page, and then I draw panels around it to tell a story. It's pretty fucking cool. It's not for everybody.
Yeah, sure, of course.
But every now and then I'm looking at a comic and I'm like, I wish there was one iconic, like, awesome image of these characters in this issue at all,
Right.
And that's something I think people could learn from '90s comics. You don't need to have like a lunchbox image of a character on every single page, but maybe 4 or 5 an issue would be nice.
Yeah, there is a.
If I'm looking through an issue of Spider-Man and I don't have like a really awesome image of Spider-Man swinging around per issue, you're doing it wrong.
At the end of the day, I don't know that it's necessary, but I think it helps. It's like sometimes cake is good without frosting, but if you can put frosting on it, now you got something you can trick everybody into eating. I've had plenty of dry, terrible cakes that I was like, that looks good. What's on the inside of this?
Yeah. Oh, did we use 2 lights at once? Or that was just the one?
It just means it needs to cool down. Yeah, hot as fuck. What if this whole arm is
Raiders of the Lost Ark imprint on your hand.
this whole fucking arm is like on fire.